entire Roman legion, nearly 9,000 men, marched onto the mist of northern Britain. Seasoned fighters, disciplined ranks, hardened by wars, they were never seen again. No battle reports, no survivors, no dead bodies. Just a silence so complete it shook the Roman Empire to its core. This is the story of Legion IX Hispana, the Ninth Legion, and how the greatest military machine of the ancient world lost its entire force without a trace. Welcome to CTT Stories, ladies and gentlemen, where we just don't tell the stories, we dive deep into them. Today, we're going to dive deep into the story of the Ninth Legion. In the height of its power, Rome didn't ask for loyalty, it demanded obedience. And few symbols of that power were as feared or as revered as Legion IX Hispana. The Ninth Legion had been fighting for centuries. It helped conquer Hispana, where it earned its name. It crushed revolts in Gaul, fought beside Caesar himself, and by 43 AD it was sent north to help invade the island of Romans called Britannia. This was no minor campaign. Britannia was wild, thick forest, swamps, rain, tribes that fought like shadows. And in the north, there was Caledonian, what we now call Scotland, land of mist and stone, and a people who never bowed. The Caledonians were warriors, but not in Roman style. They didn't line up, they didn't charge, trumpets blazing. They vanished, then struck from the woods with axes and fires. To fight them was to fight ghosts. And in 120 AD, someone, either by arrogance, order, or desperation, sent the Ninth Legion into that fog. It was supposed to be a show of force, a campaign to pacify the north. But once they crossed that invisible line into Caledonia, nothing. Not a single letter, not a wounded soldier, not even wreckage. It was like the land had swallowed them completely. The year was 120 AD. The empire was stretched thin, its borders restless, but its pride unshaken. In the north of Britannia, tensions simmered like thunders behind the hills. The tribe of Caledonia, the Roman named for what is now Scotland, had never submitted to the imperial grip. They were elusive, scattered, and viciously loyal to their land. No stone fort had tamed them, no roads had reached them, and no centurion had truly understood them. Rome viewed them not just a threat, but as an insult. Barbarians that refused to be bent, bought, or broken. And so the order came, send the Ninth. Legion IX Hispana was no ordinary garrison. These were hardened men, veterans who had fought through Gaul, Germania, and Hispana, who had crushed rebellions and buried their fallen under flag, soaked in both glory and wrath. They were professionals of violence, skilled in formation warfare, logistic, and brutality. For years, they had been stationed in Abraham, modern-day York, rebuilding roads, fortifying outposts, and keeping the uneasy peace in Roman Britain. They knew the chill of Britannic rain and the weight of Celtic resentment, but they didn't fear it. When the Ninth set out for the north, it wasn't under siege or retreat. It was a mission, a pontiff campaign, not just to suppress upsprings, but to remind every tribe from the river Tyne to the highlands that Rome was watching. Rome did not forgive. Rome sent its hammer, and the Ninth was the hammer. But as they marched out of Abraham, the forest grew thicker, the fog came sooner each day. The road narrowed, signals slowed, and village once marked on Roman maps became nothing but overgrown ruins or smoldering ash. The tribes were watching, and they weren't fighting back. Not yet. Somewhere north of Fourth Slide Valley, the Ninth crossed into the lands few Romans had returned from. The few traders and scouts who survived such journeys spoke in hushed voices of whispering trees, sudden snow, and drums that echoed through the mountains at night. The Caledonians were more than fighters. They were tacticians of fear. They struck with sound before they ever struck with steel, and then it stopped. The Ninth Legion, 5,000 to 9,000 men, depending on estimates, vanished. No last messages, no flare, no call for reinforcements, not even a rumor, just silence. And on the other hand, Rome expected reports. Instead, they got nothing. Days passed, then weeks, then winter fell hard across the north. And with each storm that rolled over the highlands, the hopes of hearing from the Ninth Legion again faded into the mist. For an empire built on orders, discipline, and meticulous record-keeping, the total disappearance of an entire legion should have caused panic or rage, or the very least a response written in stone. But what followed the vanishing of Ninth Legion was not a wave of vengeance or recovery. It was silence. Officially, Rome said nothing. There was no decree, no dispatch, no glorious memorial to honor the fallen. In the records that do survive, from imperial rolls to military rosters to the stone etchings left behind by scribes, the Ninth simply fades out. 1 year they exist, and the next they are gone, as if someone had reached into the archives and plucked them from the memory. Historians today argue about dates. Some say the Ninth was still active in the Balkans year later. Others insist those records were a different unit altogether, one renumbered to preserve dignity. The truth is blurred, maybe by time, or maybe by intent, because Rome had no use of failure. And what greater failure than sending a full legion, 9,000 Roman citizens, trained to embody imperial dominance, into the midst of Britain and never seeing them again. There are faint echoes in the years that followed, a sudden increase in fortifications, a recollections of troop, the construction of Hadrian's Wall. Just a few years later, a massive divide across Britain meant to separate Roman south from the untamable north. Some believe Hadrian's Wall wasn't just a defense, it was containment, a line drawn after a loss too staggering to admit out loud. And perhaps the most unsettling part wasn't that they vanished, it was that no one ever came looking. Not a single recovery voice was recorded. No legion followed to reclaim the standard, the Aquila, the eagle-topped staff that no Roman force has ever left behind willingly. In the culture of Rome, losing the eagle was a disgrace so severe it could cost generals their lives. Yet no mention of such a disaster appears in the imperial scrolls. Why? Maybe Rome didn't want to admit what had happened. Maybe what happened was too terrifying to describe. Or maybe, just maybe, the 9th Legion didn't die in a battle, but in something far more worse. No army, not even one as mighty as Rome's, simply disappears. But the 9th Legion did. What happened to them is one of the oldest unsolved mysteries in military history. Over the centuries, many theories have tried to explain it, but none of them feels complete. Each one leads to more questions, but let's look at most believable and most disturbing ones. The most common theory is simple: they were attacked brutally. completely. The Caledonian tribe may have waited for the perfect moment, then surrounded the Ninth Legion in the wilderness. And if the legion was cut off from the supply lines, outnumbered and caught in rough terrain, they could have been overwhelmed, not in a battle of honor, but in a slaughter, fast and merciless. Some say the tribes might have taken every body, every sword, every trace, burying them deep or scattering the remains so far apart that no one could ever prove what happened. The highland terrain is wild, filled with rivers, bogs, cliff, and forest so thick you can walk past a body and never see it. If the theory is true, then the Nine didn't just lose a battle, they were wiped off the earth. But even if that happened, why didn't Rome send someone to investigate? Why was it never recorded? That brings us to theory number 2. Rome was proud, maybe too proud. If the Ninth had been destroyed, it would have been a major embarrassment, especially by tribe the empire saw as primitive. So instead of admitting the loss, some believe Rome covered it up. They renamed the other legions, destroyed or buried the reports, moved soldiers quietly to other posts. They erased the Ninth from the records like they never existed. To the outside world, the empire stayed strong, but under the surface, something had cracked. If this was true, it means Rome wasn't just hiding a defeat. They were hiding how powerful their enemies had become. Theory number 3 suggests they were deserted. Some believe the Ninth didn't die at all. They deserted, gave up on Rome, left their post and disappeared into the wild north. Maybe even joined the tribes, but this theory doesn't fit. Discretion on that scale would have caused panic. The soldiers would have been hunted down. Records would show punishment or shame, but there's nothing, no trial, no shame, just silence. The kind of silence doesn't come from disobedience. It comes from something no one wants to talk about. Theory number 4 suggests they were sent elsewhere. Roman records show a few scattered mentions of a Ninth Legion in later years. But some scholars believe that was a different group with the same name, a way to save face, keep up appearance and pretend the Ninth had survived. But if that's true, why are there no personal accounts? No officers speaking of the terrible loss in the Britain? Why did the Legion's trial end in Abraham and never pick back up? The most chilling theory: they were never meant to come back. The most chilling theory is that they were never meant to come back. Some whispers about a theory rarely spoken, that the Ninth was sent to disappear, that perhaps the soldiers had become troublesome, that a failed rebellion within the Legion or a political enemy inside Rome made the Ninth a problem. And what does Rome do with problems? It buries them quietly, completely. Maybe the Ninth was never meant to return. In every theory, there's a thread of fear. Not just fear of loss, but fear of being forgotten. Because to vanish is one thing, but to vanish and be erased is something else entirely. Nearly 2,000 years later, the Ninth Legion is still missing. No mass grave has ever been found. No Roman standard has ever been removed. No survivor's tale. No confession from a tribe, nothing but questions carved into the history like scars that never faded. And maybe that's the part that haunts us the most, because this wasn't a simple soldier lost in a forest. It was an entire army. Thousands of trained men, commanders, engineers, fighters, gone. No one watched them die. No one lived to tell the story. No one can even agree if they died at all. But their absence, that speaks louder than their presence ever did. And why does this story still matters? Because it reminds us of something unforgettable. Even empires, no matter how powerful, can lose control. Even Rome, the builder of roads, of laws, of orders, had shadows it couldn't explain. And when those shadows swallowed the ninth, they had swallowed more than men. They swallowed Rome's pride. It's certainly its story. So what really happened to the ninth? Were they wiped out in a brutal ambush, erased by politics, absorbed into the enemy? Or did they vanish into something deeper than we've ever imagined? The forest doesn't say. The mist never left a trail, and the land never gave them back. Thank you for walking with us through one of history's greatest disappearance. If this story made you pause, if it made you wonder, then maybe, just maybe, you are starting to hear the silence too. Because some mysteries whisper, but others, they disappear without a sound. Subscribe to CTT Stories for more true history told with cinematic soul. Drop a comment below, still marching, if you believe the ninth is still out there somewhere. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.